The photograph, taken by traveling photographer William Shue in September 1856 outside Richmond, Virginia, captures a moment that should horrify but instead fascinates. A black man, approximately 28 years old, stands in fighting stance in the center of a rope-bounded ring measuring roughly 16 feet by 16 feet. His body shows the evidence of his profession. Thick muscle across shoulders and arms, visible scars on his ribs and face. Hands wrapped in strips of cloth that provide minimal protection against the impact of fist on bone. Behind him, perhaps 40 white men in formal dress. Top hats, waistcoats, watch chains gleaming, stand or sit on wooden benches, their faces showing the excited anticipation of spectators about to witness violence. The contrast is stark and deliberate. One black man stripped to fighting shorts, surrounded by well-dressed white men who've gathered to watch him damage another human being or be damaged himself, all for their entertainment and profit. September 14th, 1856, 2:47 p.m. A tobacco plantation 23 miles outside Richmond, Virginia. Temperature, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. The late afternoon sun heating the dirt ring where two men will soon attempt to beat each other unconscious using only their fists. Moses Turner, 28 years old and enslaved property of plantation owner Robert Whitfield, stands in his corner of the ring rolling his shoulders to keep muscles warm while his opponent, an enslaved man named Jacob from a neighboring plantation, does the same 16 feet away. This is Moses's 47th fight in 3 years. His third fight this month, his body carrying accumulated damage from 46 previous battles that include a broken nose that healed crooked, 3 cracked ribs that ache in cold weather, a partially detached retina in his left eye that makes peripheral vision unreliable, and scar tissue on both hands where bones broke through skin during particularly violent exchanges. He is, by any reasonable medical standard, already permanently damaged. He will fight anyway because the alternative, remaining enslaved with no hope of purchasing freedom, is worse than any physical harm he might suffer in the next 30 to 45 minutes. The mathematics that brought Moses to this ring for the 47th time are brutally simple. Virginia law permits enslaved people to purchase their own freedom if they can raise sufficient funds and their owner agrees to the transaction. The price for Moses's freedom, $800, representing his assessed value as a 28-year-old male in excellent physical condition with valuable blacksmithing skills. The price for his wife Sarah's freedom, $600, her value as a 26-year-old woman capable of fieldwork and domestic service. The prices for their 4 children, Benjamin age 8, Rebecca age 6, Samuel age 4, and infant Ruth age 1, range from $200 for Ruth to $400 for Benjamin, who is old enough to begin productive labor. Total cost to purchase the entire family's freedom, $12,800. Moses's earnings from 46 fights to date, $920, generated from a complex profit-sharing arrangement where Robert Whitfield keeps 85% of all gambling winnings generated by Moses's victories, and Moses receives the remaining 15%. At this rate, Moses needs approximately 147 more fights to earn enough to buy his family's freedom, assuming he wins every fight, survives without career-ending injury, and Whitfield honors their agreement. But Moses has developed a strategy to accelerate this timeline, one that requires convincing Whitfield to modify their profit-sharing arrangement and accepting even greater physical risk than he already faces. Today's fight, his 47th, will serve as demonstration of this strategy. Moses has negotiated with Whitfield to receive 20% of gambling profits instead of 15%. In exchange for Moses agreeing to fight more frequently and against more dangerous opponents. The man standing across the ring from Moses, Jacob, is one such dangerous opponent. 32 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, approximately 215 pounds. winner of 18 consecutive fights, known for a punching style that targets the body and head with equal brutality. The betting odds favor Jacob at 3-2, meaning Whitfield can earn significantly more by betting on Moses if Moses wins. Whitfield has wagered $400 on Moses at 3-2 odds, standing to win $600 profit if Moses defeats Jacob. Moses' share of that $600 profit, under the new 20% agreement, $120, the most he's ever earned from a single fight. The fight begins at 2:52 p.m. when the referee, a plantation owner named Thomas Crawford, who serves as neutral arbiter for these matches, signals both fighters to advance to the center of the ring. Bare-knuckle boxing in 1856. Virginia follows rules adapted from London prize ring rules established in 1838. Fights continue until one man cannot continue. Rounds end when a fighter is knocked down. 30 seconds allowed between rounds for recovery. No hitting a downed opponent. No biting or eye gouging, though nearly everything else is permitted. These rules make bare-knuckle boxing less immediately lethal than no-rules fighting, but far more dangerous than gloved boxing that won't be developed for another 2 decades. Without gloves, every punch carries risk of breaking the puncher's hand against the opponent's skull, creating a strategic dynamic where body shots become preferable to headshots for fighters who want long careers rather than quick knockouts. Moses learned this principle the hard way during his first 8 fights, breaking bones in his right hand twice and his left hand once by throwing poorly aimed punches at opponents' heads. Those injuries cost him 3 months of healing time, during which he couldn't fight and couldn't earn money toward his family's freedom. Since then, Moses has refined his technique. He targets the body almost exclusively, throwing hooks and uppercuts to his opponent's ribs, liver, and solar plexus, locations where accumulated damage causes opponents to quit without requiring the hand-breaking skull shots that end careers. This approach makes Moses' fights longer and less spectacular than knockout artists who go for the head. But it has allowed him to fight 46 times in 3 years without career-ending hand injuries. Today's fight will test whether this strategy works against a genuinely dangerous opponent who outweighs him by 25 pounds, has earned his reputation through vicious head hunting. Jacob throws the first punch at 2:53 p.m., a straight right hand aimed at Moses' face that travels approximately 18 inches and arrives with enough force that Moses feels the wind from its passage as he slips left to avoid the fist. The punch misses by perhaps 2 inches. Close enough that Moses understands immediately how dangerous Jacob is. The man has speed surprising for his size, and his punches carry knockout power. Moses responds with 2 quick jabs to Jacob's midsection, neither punch hard enough to cause damage, but both serving to measure distance and test Jacob's defensive reactions. Jacob absorbs the body shots without visible effect and counters with a left hook that catches Moses on the side of the head, a glancing blow rather than direct impact, but still powerful enough to make Moses' vision blur momentarily and his legs feel briefly unsteady. The first round lasts 4 minutes and 23 seconds, ending when Jacob lands a hard body shot that drops Moses to one knee, automatically concluding the round under London prize ring rules. Moses uses his 30-second rest period to force air into lungs that feel compressed by Jacob's punch, while his cornerman, an enslaved blacksmith named Thomas, who works alongside Moses in Whitfield's forge, pours water over Moses' head and shoulders and whispers advice. He's faster than you, but he gets tired quick. Big men always get tired. Let him punch himself out for 2 more rounds, then work his body until he can't breathe. Moses nods, unable to speak yet because breathing still hurts, and prepares for round 2. Round 2 begins at 2:58 p.m. and follows a pattern that will repeat for the next 6 rounds. Jacob attacks aggressively, throwing powerful punches at Moses' head and body, landing perhaps 40% of his shots and making each landed punch count through sheer force. Moses defends, evades, absorbs punishment, and occasionally counterpunches to Jacob's body, not trying to match Jacob's power, but rather accumulating small amounts of damage that will matter more as the fight progresses. The strategy requires Moses to accept significant short-term pain. Punches that bruise ribs, split skin above his eyes, cause his ears to ring, in exchange for the possibility that Jacob will tire before Moses does. The calculation is both strategic and desperate. Moses cannot match Jacob's power, so he must outlast Jacob's endurance, and outlasting means taking punishment while waiting for opportunity. By round 4, which begins at 3:12 p.m. and lasts 3 minutes and 47 seconds, Moses' strategy shows signs of working. Jacob's punches have lost some speed. His breathing has become labored enough that Moses can hear it during exchanges, and his defensive movements have slowed sufficiently that Moses' body shots are landing with increasing frequency. Moses begins targeting Jacob's liver, a fist-sized organ on the right side of the body that, when struck hard enough, causes immediate incapacitation through a neurological reaction that fighters describe as the worst pain they've ever experienced. Moses has ended 7 previous fights with liver shots, and he believes Jacob's fatigue has created an opening for the same technique. Round 5 begins at 3:18 p.m., and Moses shifts from survival mode to attack mode. He increases his output from approximately 15 punches per round to 30 punches per round, almost all of them aimed at Jacob's midsection, sacrificing accuracy for volume because exhausted fighters can't maintain defensive guard against sustained body attack. Jacob tries to respond with headshots, but his arms are heavy now, his punches arriving slowly enough that Moses can see them coming and slip most attempts. Moses lands a hard right hook to Jacob's liver at 3:21 p.m., and Jacob's reaction, immediate collapse to his knees, face contorted, breath coming in gasps, tells Moses that the fight is effectively over, even though Jacob beats the 30-second count and staggers upright for round 6. Round 6 lasts 47 seconds. Jacob, still hurt from the liver shot and unable to defend effectively, takes 3 more body punches before falling forward onto his face, unconscious before he hits the dirt. The referee counts to 30, confirms Jacob is not getting up, and declares Moses the winner at 3:24 p.m. Total fight duration, 32 minutes spread across 6 rounds. Moses' condition at fight end: standing but damaged, his face bloody from cuts above both eyes, his ribs bruised, his hands swollen, his breathing ragged. Jacob's condition: unconscious for approximately 2 minutes, then awake but unable to stand for another 5 minutes. Eventually helped from the ring by his owner's assistants, who load him into a wagon for transport back to his plantation, where he'll spend the next 3 days in bed recovering. Robert Whitfield collects his winnings from the bookmaker at 3:31 p.m. $600 profit from his $400 bet at 3-2 odds. Whitfield's total earnings from today's fight, including side bets and stakes, $740. Moses' share under their 20% agreement, $148, the most he's earned from any single fight. Whitfield pays Moses in cash immediately, a stack of bills that Moses counts 3 times to ensure accuracy, before folding them carefully and putting them in a small leather pouch he keeps hidden in his cabin. Moses' total savings toward his family's freedom after 47 fights, $1,068. Amount still needed to purchase his entire family, $132. Estimated number of additional fights required at 148 per fight, 12, assuming Moses wins every fight and suffers no injuries that prevent him from fighting. But Moses has been fighting for 3 years and understands that assumptions about injury-free combat are fantasy. Every fight carries risk of career-ending damage. A punch that detaches a retina completely rather than partially. A fall that breaks a neck or cracks a skull. Accumulated brain trauma that causes seizures or permanent cognitive impairment. Moses has watched other fighters suffer these injuries, has seen men who were dominant fighters become shells of themselves after one bad punch or one unlucky fall. He knows that betting on 12 more injury-free fights is betting on unlikely luck, which is why he's developed an alternative strategy that he will propose to Whitfield tonight after the fight's immediate aftermath settles. The proposal Moses plans to make represents a desperate gamble. He will fight more frequently and against more dangerous opponents if Whitfield agrees to increase Moses's share of profits to 30% instead of 20%. More frequent fights mean less recovery time between battles, increasing injury risk and accelerating physical breakdown. Fighting more dangerous opponents means facing men like Jacob or worse, fighters who might permanently damage or kill Moses. But 30% of profits means Moses could potentially buy his family's freedom in 6 to 8 fights instead of 12. Cutting the timeline by months and reducing total number of battles his body must endure. The mathematics are brutal but straightforward. Either take fewer but safer fights over longer time period, risking that injury or death interrupts earnings before reaching the $2,800 goal, or take more dangerous fights over shorter time period, risking immediate catastrophic injury, but potentially achieving freedom before accumulated damage makes continued fighting impossible. Moses presents this proposal to Whitfield at 7:23 p.m. that evening, sitting in Whitfield's study where plantation business is normally conducted. An unusual setting for conversation between enslaved person and owner, but appropriate given that they're negotiating a business arrangement rather than discussing normal master-slave interactions. Moses explains his reasoning. The current timeline is too long, the injury risk increases with every fight, and he wants to maximize earnings while his body can still compete effectively. Whitfield listens, calculates the financial implications, and proposes a counteroffer that is both more generous and more exploitative than Moses expected. Whitfield's counteroffer: Moses will receive 25% of all gambling profits instead of the requested 30%. But Whitfield will also arrange fights more frequently, twice per month instead of once, and will bet larger amounts on Moses, increasing potential earnings per fight. However, the new arrangement includes a dark provision. If Moses loses a fight, his share of profits for that event is 0, creating additional pressure to win every time, despite facing more dangerous opponents with less recovery time between fights. Whitfield's calculation is transparently mercenary. The arrangement maximizes Whitfield's profits during Moses's peak earning period, while giving Moses a theoretical path to faster freedom. But it also ensures that Moses bears all the risk, while Whitfield captures most of the reward. Moses accepts the counteroffer at 7:41 p.m. because he has no better alternative. The mathematics of his situation allow no room for idealism or negotiation. He needs $1,730 more to buy his family's freedom. He's 28 years old and already carrying significant damage from 47 fights. And every month he delays is another month his children grow older and their purchase prices increase. Under the new arrangement, if Moses wins fights averaging $200 in profit per fight, possible with larger bets Whitfield promises to place, Moses's 25% share equals $50 per fight. At $50 per fight, he needs 35 more victories to reach his goal. With twice monthly fights, that's 17.5 months if he wins every fight, less than a year and a half to freedom if everything goes perfectly. Of course, everything won't go perfectly. Moses understands this, but imperfect progress toward freedom is better than perfect stagnation in slavery. The new arrangement begins in October 1856, just 2 weeks after Moses's 47th fight against Jacob. Whitfield arranges Moses's 48th fight against an enslaved fighter named Samuel from a plantation in North Carolina, a man with 23 victories and a reputation for never being knocked out. The fight takes place on October 12, 1856, and lasts 14 rounds spanning 47 minutes before Samuel's corner throws in the towel to prevent further damage to their fighter. Moses wins but suffers a broken bone in his left hand during the 8th round, an injury that will limit his punching power for the next 6 weeks. Despite the injury, Moses earns $47 from the fight, Whitfield having bet conservatively due to Samuel's reputation. Moses wraps his injured hand carefully, continues working in the blacksmith forge with his right hand doing most of the heavy work, and prepares for his next fight scheduled for October 26th, just 2 weeks away. Fight 49, on October 26th against a fighter named Thomas, ends in the 3rd round when Moses lands a perfect liver shot that incapacitates Thomas completely. Moses's injured left hand prevents him from throwing his normal combination punches, but his right hand is sufficient to end the fight quickly. Earnings, $52. Broken hand is healing but still painful, limiting training for the next fight. Fight 50, on November 9th against a fighter named Benjamin, lasts 11 rounds before Benjamin quits due to accumulated body damage. Moses fights mostly with his right hand, protecting his still healing left hand, and wins through sheer determination and superior conditioning. Earnings, $56. Left hand is mostly healed, but will always be weaker than before the break. By December 1856, Moses has fought 52 times, earned $143 total, and suffered injuries that include the partially detached retina in his left eye, permanent hearing loss in his right ear from repeated headshots, chronic pain in both hands from multiple fractures, scarring across his ribs, and early signs of what modern medicine would recognize as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Brain damage from repeated concussive impacts that causes mood changes, memory problems, and impaired judgment. Moses is 28 years old. His body shows damage typically associated with men in their 50s. His savings toward his family's freedom, $1,243. Amount still needed, $1,257. Number of additional fights required at $50 average per fight, 31. The psychological toll of this mathematics weighs on Moses as heavily as the physical toll of the fighting itself. He has been fighting for 3 years, has endured 52 brutal battles, has damaged his body in ways that will affect him for the rest of his life, however long that life might be. And he is only 44% of the way to his goal. If he maintains the current pace, 2 fights per month, winning every fight, averaging $50 per fight, he needs 15.5 more months to earn the remaining $1,557. But Moses knows the current pace is unsustainable. His body is breaking down faster than he can earn money. His left eye's vision problems are worsening, making it harder to see punches coming from that side. His hearing loss makes it difficult to hear his cornerman's advice during fights. His hands hurt constantly, even when not fighting. And he knows that each additional punch he throws risks fracture that could end his career permanently. Moses discusses this reality with his wife Sarah on December 18, 1856, in their cabin after their children are asleep, speaking quietly so as not to wake them. Sarah knows Moses fights. Everyone on the plantation knows. The owners make no secret of it. But Moses has never fully explained the extent of his injuries or the brutal mathematics of earning enough to buy the family's freedom. Tonight, sitting on their bed in the dim light of a single candle, Moses tells her everything. The 52 fights, the accumulating damage, the calculation that he needs 31 more fights, but doubts his body can survive 31 more fights without catastrophic injury. Sarah listens without interrupting, her face showing the conflict between wanting her family free and not wanting her husband dead or permanently disabled in pursuit of that freedom. When Moses finishes explaining, Sarah asks a question that will reshape his strategy for the remaining fights. Can we buy the children's freedom first, then mine, then yours? Moses considers this. The original plan was to save until he had enough to buy everyone simultaneously, preventing the possibility that Whitfield might sell family members to other plantations before Moses completed his earnings. But Sarah's proposal has mathematical advantages. By purchasing the children's freedom first, starting with the youngest who are cheapest, Moses can secure their freedom while his body can still fight. Then work toward purchasing Sarah and finally himself, even if his fighting career ends prematurely. The strategy accepts the risk that Moses might never earn enough to buy his own freedom, but prioritizes ensuring the children are free even if their parents remain enslaved. Moses calculates the new mathematics. Ruth costs $200, Samuel costs $300, Rebecca costs $350, Benjamin costs $400. Total for all 4 children, $1,250. Moses' current savings, $1,243. He is $7 short of being able to purchase Ruth, his youngest daughter. One more fight will give him enough to buy Ruth's freedom. The realization that his next fight could free his 1-year-old daughter gives Moses a surge of motivation that overwhelms his body's pain and fatigue. He tells Sarah that he'll buy Ruth's freedom after his next fight, scheduled for January 3rd, 1857. Sarah cries, whether from relief or fear or exhaustion, Moses isn't sure. But he holds her and promises that he will fight as many times as necessary to free their entire family, even if it kills him. Fight 53, on January 3rd, 1857, becomes the most important fight of Moses' career, despite being relatively ordinary in its conduct. His opponent is a fighter named Peter, 26 years old. Winner of 14 out of 19 fights, a competent but not exceptional boxer who fights conservatively and relies on outlasting opponents rather than overwhelming them. The fight lasts 9 rounds. Moses wins by technical knockout when Peter's corner stops the fight to prevent further punishment, and Moses earns $58 from his 25% share of Whitfield's gambling profits. Total earnings, $1,301. On January 6, 1857, Moses approaches Whitfield with a request to purchase Ruth's freedom for $200. Whitfield agrees. The transaction is documented in plantation records, and Ruth becomes free at age 1 year and 3 months, the first member of the Turner family to gain legal freedom. The moment when Moses holds the manumission papers that declare Ruth free, a single sheet of paper signed by Whitfield and witnessed by 2 other plantation owners, stating that the Negro child called Ruth, property of Robert Whitfield, is hereby manumitted and declared free, represents both triumph and tragedy. Triumph because his daughter will grow up free, will never be sold, will never be whipped, will have opportunities that enslaved children can never have. Tragedy because Moses achieved this freedom by allowing white men to beat him for their entertainment, by damaging his body for their profit, by turning himself into a spectacle of violence that reinforces the same system that enslaved his family in the first place. Moses understands this contradiction, lives within it, accepts it because he has no choice. The system is what it is. He can either work within it or accept permanent enslavement. He chooses to work within it, to use his fists to buy his family's freedom 1 person at a time, to transform violence into liberation even though the transformation requires participating in his own exploitation. Fight 54 occurs on January 17, 1857, 2 weeks after Ruth's manumission. Moses faces a fighter named Aaron, a dangerous opponent with 31 victories and only 2 losses, known for knockout power and aggressive style. The fight is brutal, even by Moses' standards. Aaron lands multiple hard shots to Moses' head in the early rounds, causing Moses' vision to blur and his legs to feel unsteady. But Moses weathers the storm, survives Aaron's early aggression, and begins working Aaron's body in rounds 4 through 7. In the 8th round, Moses lands a combination: right hook to the body, left hook to the body, right uppercut to the solar plexus, that drops Aaron to his knees, gasping for air. Aaron cannot continue. Moses wins. Earnings, 61. Damage sustained. Possible concussion from headshots, additional hearing loss in right ear, bruised ribs. Total savings, $1,300. Amount needed to buy Samuel's freedom, $300. Amount short, $138. Estimated fights needed, 3. The pattern continues through winter and spring 1857. Moses fights twice per month. Wins most fights, but loses 3. Once because he's sick with fever during the fight, once because his opponent is simply better, once because his injured left hand fails during a crucial exchange, and he cannot defend against a flurry of punches that knock him unconscious. The 3 losses cost him potential earnings of approximately $150, setting back his timeline by 3 months. But the victories accumulate. Fight 55 earns 54, Fight 56 earns 48, Fight 57 earns 67, Fight 58 earns 52. By April 1857, Moses has $1,583 saved, enough to purchase Samuel's freedom. Samuel's manumission occurs on April 23, 1857, 3 months after Ruth's freedom. Samuel is 4 years old enough to understand vaguely that something important has happened, but too young to grasp the concept of freedom versus slavery. Moses holds the manumission papers, the second document that declares a member of his family legally free, and feels the same mixture of triumph and exhaustion. 2 children free, 2 children and Sarah still enslaved. Moses himself still enslaved. Total amount earned through 58 fights, $1,383. Amount spent on freedom, $500. Amount remaining toward total family freedom goal, $1,083. Amount still needed, $1,117. For Rebecca, $350. Benjamin, $400. Sarah, $600. Moses, $800. Number of fights remaining if Moses averages $50 per fight, 34. 34 more fights. Moses is 29 years old. His body has already endured 58 brutal battles. His left eye's vision continues deteriorating. His hands are so damaged that he can no longer make tight fists without pain. His hearing loss has progressed to the point where he sometimes cannot hear the referee's instructions. His cognitive function has declined noticeably. He forgets conversations, struggles to concentrate, experiences mood swings that range from depression to irritability. By any reasonable assessment, Moses should stop fighting before he suffers catastrophic injury. But stopping means abandoning his family to slavery. So Moses continues. Fight 59 against a fighter named William. Fight 60 against Daniel. Fight 61 against James. Each fight adds to the damage. Each victory adds to the savings. Each step forward costs a piece of Moses's body and mind that he will never recover. The photograph taken in September 1856, showing Moses in fighting stance surrounded by spectators, captures him at Fight 47, before the new twice-monthly schedule began, before he bought Ruth's freedom, before the accumulated damage from the subsequent 11 fights further degraded his body. In that photograph, Moses is still relatively intact, still capable of the fighting that will continue for another year and eventually free his entire family. But if you look carefully at his face in that image, if you examine his eyes despite the photograph's limited resolution, you can see something that transcends the frozen moment. The knowledge that he is destroying himself deliberately, that he is trading his body's integrity for his family's freedom, that he is participating in a system of violence and exploitation because it's the only path available to him, and that he will continue fighting until either his family is free or his body fails completely, whichever comes first. Fight 62 takes place on May 15, 1857, against a fighter named Marcus from a plantation in South Carolina, a man with 27 victories and a reputation for breaking opponents' ribs with body shots so powerful that fighters sometimes coughed blood for days afterward. Moses, now 29 years old and carrying damage from 61 previous fights, enters the ring knowing that Marcus represents exactly the kind of dangerous opponent Robert Whitfield promised when they negotiated the 25% profit-sharing arrangement. The betting odds favor Marcus at 2-1, meaning Whitfield stands to make significant money if Moses wins. Whitfield has wagered $500 on Moses at those odds, potentially earning $1,000 profit if Moses defeats Marcus. Moses' 25% share of a $1,000 profit would be $250, enough to buy Rebecca's freedom, $350, after one more similar victory, cutting months off the timeline and reducing the number of times Moses must put his deteriorating body at risk. The fight begins at 3:17 p.m. on a humid afternoon with temperature at 82 degrees. The air thick enough that breathing requires conscious effort even before physical exertion begins. Marcus attacks immediately, targeting Moses' midsection with hooks that land with impacts Moses feels in his spine. The first punch breaks something. Moses hears a crack and feels sharp pain in his left side that suggests a cracked rib, the fourth rib injury of his fighting career. Moses has fought with cracked ribs before, knows the pain is manageable if he controls his breathing and avoids twisting movements that stress the injured area. He adjusts his defensive stance to protect his left side and continues fighting because stopping means forfeiting the fight, earning nothing, and delaying Rebecca's freedom by at least one more brutal battle. Round 3, beginning at 3:28 p.m., tests Moses' ability to function through pain. Every breath sends sharp sensation through his left side. Every punch he throws with his left hand causes the cracked rib to shift in ways that make him gasp. But Moses has developed pain management techniques over 61 fights. He breathes shallowly to minimize rib movement. He throws mostly right-hand punches to reduce stress on his left side, and he uses constant movement to prevent Marcus from landing follow-up shots to the same location. The strategy works well enough to survive rounds 3 and 4. But by round 5, Moses' body begins betraying him in a new way. At 3:41 p.m., during round 5, Moses experiences what modern medicine would recognize as a petit mal seizure, a brief episode of altered consciousness caused by abnormal electrical activity in his brain, likely triggered by accumulated concussive damage from 61 fights worth of head trauma. The seizure lasts approximately 3 seconds, during which Moses loses awareness of his surroundings, his vision goes blank, and his muscles lock briefly. To observers, it looks like Moses simply freezes mid-movement, a momentary hesitation that Marcus exploits by landing 3 consecutive punches to Moses' head. The punches knock Moses to the ground, ending round 5 and giving him 30 seconds to recover. Moses regains full consciousness during the rest period, confused about the 3-second gap in his memory, but aware enough to understand he experienced some kind of neurological event. His cornerman Thomas, who has seen Moses through 61 previous fights, asks if Moses wants to quit. Moses' answer is the same one he's given before. "How much money do we earn if I quit?" Thomas knows the answer is 0. Moses continues to round 6, fighting on instinct and conditioning because his cognitive function is impaired enough that tactical thinking has become difficult. He survives round 6 by clinching whenever Marcus gets close, using his superior wrestling skills developed during blacksmith work to tie up Marcus's arms and prevent punching until the referee separates them. Round 7 marks the turning point. Marcus, having thrown perhaps 200 hard punches over 6 rounds, has exhausted himself pursuing the knockout that Moses' defensive tactics prevented. Marcus's punches have slowed, his breathing has become labored, and his guard has dropped enough that Moses sees an opening. 3 consecutive body shots to Marcus's right side, each one landing in the same spot, accumulating damage to Marcus's ribs and liver that finally drops Marcus to his knees at 3:53 p.m. Marcus attempts to stand but cannot, his body refusing to respond to mental commands, and the referee counts to 30 and declares Moses the winner. Moses's condition at fight end: standing but severely compromised, cracked rib on left side, possible concussion from the headshots during his seizure, hearing in right ear further diminished, swelling around both eyes limiting vision, hands swollen to the point where he cannot make fists. He has won, which means he will receive his share of Whitfield's gambling profits. But the victory has cost him more damage than most of his previous fights combined. Whitfield collects $1,000 profit from his $500 bet at 2-to-1 odds. Moses's 25% share, $250. Total savings after 62 fights, $1,833. Amount needed to buy Rebecca's freedom, $350. Amount short, $117. Moses needs one more fight, just one more, to have enough to free his second oldest child. But Moses's body needs more than the 2 weeks Whitfield has scheduled before the next fight. The cracked rib requires at least 4 weeks to heal enough for combat. The neurological damage that caused his seizure represents worsening brain trauma that doctors would recognize as grounds for immediate retirement from fighting. And his hands are so swollen that he cannot work in the forge for a week, much less throw punches. Moses tells Whitfield on May 17, 1857, that he needs to postpone the next scheduled fight from May 29 to June 12, giving him 4 weeks recovery instead of 2. Whitfield agrees reluctantly, calculating that a rested Moses is more likely to win and generate profits than an injured Moses fighting prematurely. The 4-week break from May 15th to June 12th gives Moses time to heal physically, but also time to confront the reality of his situation psychologically. He has fought 62 times, earned $1,833, purchased freedom for 2 of his 4 children, and sustained damage that includes partial blindness in left eye, severe hearing loss in right ear, 4 cracked ribs that healed poorly and now ache constantly, multiple broken bones in both hands that cause chronic pain, scarring throughout his body, and progressive brain damage that causes seizures, memory problems, and mood instability. He is 29 years old. Medical examination in 2024 would rate his physical condition as that of a severely injured 60-year-old, with multiple chronic conditions requiring immediate treatment and permanent disability status. Moses has no access to medical examination or treatment beyond the basic first aid his wife Sarah provides, using techniques learned from other enslaved people. He treats his injuries with rest, cold water compresses for swelling, and willow bark tea for pain. Remedies that provide minimal relief, but are the only options available to enslaved people in 1857 Virginia. During these 4 weeks, Moses has a conversation with Thomas, his cornerman and fellow blacksmith, that reveals the psychological dimension of his ordeal. They are working together in Whitfield's forge on May 28, 1857, repairing farming equipment in preparation for harvest season, when Thomas says something that Moses will remember for the rest of his life. "You know you're going to die doing this, right? Maybe not in the ring, but from the damage. You're 29 and you move like an old man. Your hands shake when you think nobody's watching. You forget conversations we had yesterday. This fighting is killing you slow, and everybody can see it, except maybe you." Moses's response, recorded in Thomas's oral history testimony given to a Freedmen's Bureau interviewer in 1866, 9 years after this conversation. "I told him I knew. Of course I knew. I wasn't stupid, just desperate. I said dying free is better than living enslaved, and if I have to die to make my children free, that's a price I'm willing to pay." He asked, "What about Sarah? What about her being left alone with the children if I died?" I told him Sarah was strong, she'd manage. But the truth was, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I was just thinking about the next fight, the next child's freedom, the next step forward. Couldn't think beyond that, because thinking beyond that meant facing how impossible the whole thing was. The impossibility Thomas identified in May 1857 was mathematical. Moses needed $1,117 more to buy freedom for Rebekah, $350, Benjamin, $400, Sarah, $600, and himself, $800. At his current earning rate of approximately 50 to 60 per fight, he needed 29 to 34 more fights. Moses had already fought 62 times over 4 years, sustaining damage that any reasonable person would recognize as career-ending. Fighting 29 to 34. More times meant accepting near certainty of catastrophic injury. Permanent blindness, permanent brain damage, paralysis from spinal injury, or death in the ring from cerebral hemorrhage or cardiac arrest. The mathematics of freedom required Moses to bet his life on increasingly unfavorable odds, and everyone around him knew the bet would eventually fail. But Moses returns to fighting on June 12, 1857, because mathematics also dictated that stopping meant his family remained enslaved. Fight 63 against a fighter named Isaiah lasts 8 rounds. Moses wins by technical knockout when Isaiah's corner stops the fight. Moses earns $54. Fight 64 on June 26 against Joseph lasts 11 rounds. Moses wins on points when both fighters survive the scheduled number of rounds, and judges determine Moses landed more effective punches. Moses earns $48. Fight 65 on July 10th against Nathaniel ends in round 4, when Moses lands a perfect liver shot that drops Nathaniel like a puppet with cut strings. Moses earns $67. Total savings by July 11th, 1857, $2,002. Amount needed for Rebekah's freedom, $350. Moses has enough. Rebekah's manumission occurs on July 14, 1857, 3 months after Samuel's freedom and 6 months after Ruth's. Rebekah is 6 years old enough to understand that something significant has happened, young enough that the concept of freedom versus slavery remains abstract. Moses holds the third manumission paper. The Negro child called Rebekah, property of Robert Whitfield, is hereby manumitted and declared free, and experiences not triumph but exhaustion. 3 children free. 1 child, Sarah, and Moses himself still enslaved. Total amount earned through 65 fights, $2,002. Amount spent on freedom, $850. Amount remaining, $1,952. Amount still needed, $1,800, Benjamin $400, Sarah $600, Moses $800. Number of fights remaining at 50-60 average earnings, 30-36. The pattern of accumulating damage and diminishing returns continues through summer and fall 1857. Fight 66 earns $51 but costs Moses another cracked rib. Fight 67 earns $58 but results in a broken bone in his right hand that takes 6 weeks to heal and permanently reduces his punching power in that hand. Fight 68 ends with Moses being knocked unconscious for the first time in his career, waking up 2 minutes later with no memory of the final round and a splitting headache that lasts for 3 days. He loses that fight, earning nothing. Fight 69 earns $63 but causes further damage to his already impaired left eye. Fight 70 earns $55 but leaves him with facial injuries so severe that Whitfield makes him wait 6 weeks before the next fight because nobody will bet on a fighter who looks half dead before the match even starts. By December 1857, Moses has fought 70 times over 4 years and 5 months. His total earnings, $2,391. His total expenditures on freedom, $850. His remaining savings, $1,041. Amount still needed for full family freedom, $1,259. Benjamin $400, Sarah $600, Moses $800. Number of additional fights required, 21-25. But Moses' fighting career is approaching its end not through choice, but through physical incapacity. His vision in both eyes has degraded to the point where he has difficulty judging distances, making defensive movements less effective, and countering more difficult. His hearing loss is now bilateral and severe enough that he often cannot hear the referee's instructions during fights. His hands are so damaged that he can barely form fists, reducing his punching power by approximately 40% compared to his early fights. His neurological problems have worsened to the point where he experiences seizures approximately once per week, usually petit mal episodes lasting a few seconds, but occasionally grand mal seizures that cause him to lose consciousness and convulse for up to 2 minutes. The question facing Moses in December 1857 is not whether he can continue fighting. He demonstrably cannot continue much longer before catastrophic injury or death, but rather how to maximize his remaining fights to secure as much freedom as possible for his family before his body fails completely. He makes a strategic decision that prioritizes his children's freedom over his own, or even Sarah's. He will fight until he earns enough to buy Benjamin's freedom, then reassess whether continued fighting is possible. This decision accepts the probability that Moses will never earn enough to buy his own freedom, possibly not enough to buy Sarah's freedom, but ensures that all 4 children will be free even if their parents remain enslaved. Fight 71 takes place on January 8, 1858, against a fighter named Caleb, a 24-year-old with 19 victories and exceptional speed. Moses, now 30 years old and fighting on borrowed time, employs a strategy of pure survival. Defend, clinch, weather the storm. Look for one opportunity to land the kind of fight-ending body shot that has won him dozens of previous fights. The strategy works for 5 rounds, Moses absorbing punishment but avoiding knockout blows. And in round 6, Moses lands a right uppercut to Caleb's solar plexus that ends the fight immediately. Moses earns $59. Total savings, $1,600. Amount needed for Benjamin's freedom, $400. Moses has enough. Benjamin's manumission occurs on January 11, 1858, 6 months after Rebekah's freedom. Benjamin is 8 years old, the oldest of Moses' children, old enough to understand fully what his father has done to purchase the family's freedom. Years later, in an 1889 interview with a newspaper reporter, Benjamin will describe the moment when his father gave him the manumission papers. He handed me the paper and said, "You're free now. Don't ever let anyone put you back in chains." His hands were shaking when he gave me that paper, and I could see he was in pain just standing there. I asked him if he was okay, and he said, "I'm fine, son. I'll fight as many times as I have to." I didn't understand then that he was dying for us. I understand now. With all 4 children legally free, Moses faces a decision. Continue fighting to buy Sarah's freedom and his own, or stop before he suffers injury that kills him or leaves him unable to work and support his now free children. The mathematics of this decision are different than before. If Moses stops fighting now, his children remain free, but Sarah and Moses remain enslaved. If Moses continues fighting and suffers catastrophic injury, his children remain free, but he might die or become permanently disabled, leaving Sarah to support the family alone while still enslaved. If Moses continues fighting and succeeds in earning enough to buy Sarah's freedom, $600, he and Sarah can work together to support their free children even if Moses never earns enough to buy his own freedom, $800. Moses chooses to continue fighting with the goal of purchasing Sarah's freedom, accepting that his own freedom is probably unattainable given his physical condition, but believing that Sarah's freedom is achievable with approximately 10 to 12 more fights. This decision is both pragmatic and sacrificial. Pragmatic because 2 free adults can support 4 free children better than 1 free adult and 1 enslaved person. Sacrificial because Moses understands that 10 to 12 more fights will almost certainly cause him permanent disability or death. But he prioritizes his wife's freedom over his own survival. Fight 72 occurs on January 29, 1858, 3 weeks after Benjamin's manumission. Moses faces a fighter named Elijah, 27 years old, winner of 25 consecutive fights. Considered one of the most dangerous fighters in Virginia's underground boxing circuit. Whitfield has arranged this fight because the betting odds against Moses are high enough, 3 to 1. that a Moses victory would generate enormous profits. Whitfield bets $600 on Moses at 3-to-1 odds, standing to win $1,800 profit if Moses defeats Elijah. Moses' 25% share of an $1,800 profit would be $450, enough to buy most of Sarah's freedom after just one more fight instead of the 10 to 12 fights Moses had calculated based on his usual earnings. The fight against Elijah begins at 2:38 p.m. on a cold afternoon with temperature at 41 degrees. Cold enough that fighters' breath creates clouds of vapor that obscure vision during exchanges. Elijah attacks aggressively from round 1. His strategy clearly designed to overwhelm Moses quickly before Moses' superior conditioning can become a factor in later rounds. Moses defends as he has defended in 71 previous fights, absorbing punches while looking for opportunities to counter. But his degraded vision and hearing make defense more difficult than in earlier fights. By round 3, Moses has been hit more times than in any fight since his early career, his face bleeding from cuts above both eyes, his body showing red welts where Elijah's punches have landed repeatedly. Round 4, beginning at 2:53 p.m., becomes the crisis point. Elijah lands a combination: left hook to Moses' head, right hook to his head, left uppercut to his chin, that sends Moses to the ground unconscious. Moses lies motionless in the dirt for approximately 45 seconds while the referee counts to 30, then continues counting to verify Moses cannot continue. Thomas, Moses' corner man, enters the ring and kneels beside Moses, trying to revive him with water and smelling salts. Moses regains consciousness at approximately the 60-second mark, confused and disoriented, asking where he is and what happened. The fight is over. Moses has lost. His earnings, 0. But more seriously, Moses has suffered what modern medicine would recognize as a severe concussion with extended loss of consciousness, indicating significant brain trauma that requires immediate medical attention and likely months of recovery. Moses has no access to medical attention beyond Thomas's first aid. He spends the next 3 days in his cabin, mostly unconscious or semi-conscious, experiencing headaches so severe that he vomits repeatedly and cannot tolerate light or noise. Sarah tends to him, using cold compresses to reduce swelling and willow bark tea to manage pain. But she has no treatment for brain injury beyond keeping Moses quiet and hoping he recovers. Moses does recover after a fashion, regaining consciousness and the ability to move around by the 4th day. But his cognitive function has noticeably declined. He has difficulty remembering conversations, struggles to perform simple arithmetic that previously came easily, and experiences personality changes that include increased irritability and emotional instability. Robert Whitfield visits Moses on February 5, 1858, 6 days after the fight against Elijah, to discuss Moses' fighting future. The conversation, as Moses later recounted to Thomas, and Thomas later testified to Friedman's Bureau interviewers, goes as follows. Whitfield: "You can't fight anymore. I'm not saying that because I care about your health. I'm saying it because you're no longer profitable. You lost to Elijah because you're too damaged to compete at this level. If I put you in the ring again, you'll lose, and I'll lose my investment." Moses: "I need $600 more to buy my wife's freedom. Give me 3 fights. I'll win them all. You'll make your money back plus profit." Whitfield: "You're 30 years old and you move like you're 60.